it's hard to imagine a less abstract question. The right to self-protection is a self-evident, inherent right that we possess wholly apart from the government. The dictionary definition of an inherent right is a right that exists by reason of an individual's status as an individual and is not derived from any other source. And perhaps the Declaration of Independence is an abstract document to Justice Sotomayor when it says that it is self-evident that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, politicians generally don't like the idea of unalienable rights because that implies that there's something bigger than them, something beyond their reach. And a government that is not limited, so they think, can do great and marvelous things. And the fact that we have rights that supersede the government is an impediment to their progress. Well, that's exactly what the Bill of Rights was intended to be, an impediment to the government's unbridled power. Now, the founders wrote the Bill of Rights not to create new rights, but to protect the old ones. And they also understood that the Second Amendment flows naturally from the right to self-protection, self-defense. And we really, really need guns for self-defense. As economist Walter Williams pointed out, gun control laws will not protect us from murderers. We need protection from the criminal justice system politicians have created.
Heck yeah.
But the Second Amendment, it doesn't end with self-defense. You know, it's interesting, the anti-gunners like to talk about gun rights in terms of hunting. Oh, who needs an AK-47 to go hunting? But a lot of the pro-gunners really only take it a step further, and they talk about the Second Amendment protecting the right to self-defense. And it's true that the Second Amendment does protect guns for hunting and firearms for self-defense, but it protects much more than that, and that is indicated by the first 13 words of the Second Amendment, which read, "A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state." Now, that prefatory clause states the amendment's purpose: to ensure that liberty and freedom would endure in this country. Now, just a word about the militia. What is that? What is that referring to? George Mason asked and answered that question in the Virginia debate of the ratification of the Constitution, when he said the militia is the whole people except for a few public officials. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia wrote about that section of the Second Amendment in the Heller decision the following. He said, "There are many reasons why the militia was thought to be necessary to the security of a free state. First, of course, it is useful in repelling invasions and suppressing insurrections. Second, it renders large standing armies unnecessary. And third, when able-bodied men of a nation are trained in arms and organized, they are better able to resist tyranny." Now, it may be politically incorrect, but it's really not that hard to understand. Each time our Second Amendment rights are infringed upon, it makes it that much more difficult, that much harder to ensure liberty. Now I want to talk for just a minute about the politicians we have today who claim that they support the Second Amendment. And really, that's just about all of them. You know, it used to be you can identify an anti-gun politician because they wore their position on their sleeve, and now they pretty much hide. It's like they wear a camo, sometimes literally. But there's something wrong with this picture if you have 3/4 of the United States Congress claims to be pro-gun. For instance, can anyone explain why, if the Second Amendment protects a fundamental individual right, that we have a government agency, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, dedicated to the regulation of gun sales? Nothing in the Constitution gives the federal government authority to regulate alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or explosives. It would make a nice Georgia country store, I suppose, but the Congress doesn't have the ability to regulate that. And if there were half as many pro-gun congressmen in Washington as claimed to be, that agency would be dismantled brick by brick. And we also forget how repugnant it is to the Second Amendment that we have to go to the government to prove that we are not criminals before we're allowed to buy a gun, with the so-called Brady background check. And the hoops that we must jump through in order to get a concealed carry permit or permission slip is just as onerous. And I also like to ask the so-called pro-gun congressmen, what about the ban on machine guns? And that gets them. They don't like to talk about machine guns. What use, after all, does a civilian have with a machine gun? And a machine gun is really properly classified as an assault weapon, not the lookalikes that were banned in 1994. I want you to look at something on the screen. There is the GOA logo, and in the center of that logo is the famous statue of a Minuteman. And what is he holding? Well, that just so happens to be a 54 caliber state-of-the-art high-powered flintlock assault musket. And to say that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to machine guns, it's like saying the First Amendment doesn't apply to the radio. If it protects anything, it protects machine guns. Now, what about the notion that the government could permanently bar felons and others from possessing guns? That law passed in 1968 was a radical and dangerous power grab by the feds, and yet many gun owners today accept it as a common sense gun measure. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel one bit safer that Martha Stewart can't own a gun. Now, maybe we're less safe. Maybe she would otherwise be able to stop a crime in Walmart when she's picking out drapes or whatever she does. And I could go on and on. There are many areas where we need to reclaim our rights. Just this week, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who, by the way, would make an excellent Supreme Court judge, I think, he wrote an article about allowing guns on airplanes, which would have been an effective and quick deterrent to terrorism, to allow law-abiding citizens and pilots to carry guns instead of creating a whole entire department to protect, so-called protect the homeland. Now, there's only one congressman out of the whole bunch who's actually introduced legislation to start peeling back the unconstitutional layers of gun control, including the '68 Act. And that man's name is, as you know, Dr. Ron Paul. And it's really a privilege to be part of this gathering, this organization. And I hope that if you're not already a member of GOA, that you might stop by the table and join up. It's only $20 a year. And join with us in standing for the Second Amendment. And just remember, it's not about gun control.